Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where hidden emotions meet untold truths. Today's story is about love, betrayal, and the power of destiny. It's a tale that reminds us, no matter how powerful we become, the heart always finds its way back to what's real. Let's begin. In the glittering skyline of Manhattan stood the glass empire of Ethan Blake, a billionaire known for his cold intellect, ruthless ambition, and a heart long thought frozen. He had everything: wealth, control, and a name that commanded respect. But what he didn't have was peace. One rainy evening, a quiet new maid joined his mansion, Clara Hayes, a woman with gentle eyes and a past she never spoke of. She came from a small town, seeking work to support her ill mother. She moved silently through his world of marble and mirrors unnoticed, until one night she wasn't. Ethan saw her comforting his frightened dog during a thunderstorm, a rare tenderness in his lifeless home. For the first time, he saw warmth where there had only been emptiness. Days turned to weeks, and every accidental glance between them became a silent conversation. Ethan began to stay home more, drawn to her simplicity, her laughter, her scent of wild jasmine, her truth. Then one night, under a crescent moon, loneliness broke its chains. They shared a single, forbidden moment. A kiss that turned into something neither planned nor forgot. But reality struck like lightning. Ethan's pride couldn't accept that he had fallen for his maid. And when Clara discovered she was pregnant, she gathered her courage and told him. He froze, denied her, accused her of deceit, of trying to trap him, and with tears in her eyes Clara walked out of his mansion, carrying both heartbreak and his unborn child. Years passed. Ethan's empire grew, but his soul hollowed. He buried himself in work, but every night, the echo of her voice haunted him. Then one morning, while visiting a charity event, his world stopped. A little boy was sitting by the donation table, helping his mother collect toys. Ethan's breath caught. The child looked up and those blue, gray eyes met his own eyes. Every lie, every wall, shattered. In that one look, Ethan saw truth, and his heart broke wide open. He followed Clara outside, trembling. "Clara," his voice cracked. "He's mine, isn't he?" Her silence was answer enough. Ethan fell to his knees before the boy, tears rolling down a face the world thought untouchable. "I denied you both once," he whispered, "but I'll spend the rest of my life making it right." The story didn't end with revenge or rage. It ended with forgiveness. Slow, fragile, but real. Ethan gave up his mansion for a home filled with laughter. And Clara, who had once been his maid, became the only queen his heart would ever bow to. Beneath the shimmer of Manhattan's skyline, where glass towers rose like crystal fortresses against the clouds, lived a man whose name was both whispered and worshipped. Ethan Blake. To the world he was the embodiment of success. The billionaire visionary who built empires out of ideas, whose very signature could shift markets, whose silence carried more weight than speeches. But inside that brilliance lay a truth no one dared to touch, a heart encased in solitude. Ethan's days were measured not in hours but in victories. His mornings began with the rustle of expensive suits, the gleam of polished floors, and the echo of footsteps in halls too vast for one man. Every surface in his penthouse reflected perfection, yet not a single reflection showed warmth. His life was a portrait painted in gold but framed in emptiness. He had lovers, yes. Beautiful, refined, temporary. They came like seasons and left without a trace, each one failing to thaw the frost within him. For Ethan had long ago convinced himself that love was a distraction, a weakness that made powerful men kneel. He had seen his father crumble in the name of it, watched his empire burn because of emotion, and swore he never would. But fate, ever amused by human certainty, had other plans. When Clara Hayes entered his mansion, she didn't carry the air of someone trying to belong. She moved softly, her steps quiet as a memory, her presence humble yet impossible to ignore. Her uniform may have said maid, but her eyes, deep, thoughtful, carrying the quiet ache of life's struggles, spoke a language Ethan hadn't heard in years: sincerity. At first, she was invisible to him, another shadow in a house full of silent workers. But one evening, during a thunderstorm that shook the very bones of the city, he found her sitting by the library fireplace, holding his terrified dog close to her chest. The animal trembled, but her voice, soft and calm, wove around it like silk. In that instant, something shifted. Ethan stood there longer than he should have, studying the scene, the glow of firelight painting her skin gold, the innocence in her hands, the kind of peace that money could never buy. It stirred something dormant inside him, something he didn't understand, or want to. The next morning, he found himself waiting for her to appear. When she entered the dining hall to clear his table, he looked up, not as an employer, but as a man suddenly curious. "Did the dog sleep well last night?" he asked, surprising even himself. She smiled, small, genuine, unguarded. "Yes, sir. He stayed near the fireplace. I think he's not afraid anymore." And neither of them knew that this simple exchange would unravel everything. The more Ethan watched her, the more the perfection around him began to feel hollow. Her laughter, rare but sincere, filled corners that had long been silent. He started noticing the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear when nervous, or how she whispered little prayers when she thought no one was watching. He noticed and he cared. It was intoxicating, that forbidden pull toward someone beneath his world. She was not like the women who adorned his parties, those polished diamonds trained to charm. Clara was raw, unpolished, real. Her simplicity was her luxury, her honesty her allure. He found excuses to be near her. A forgotten document, a sudden question, a passing compliment that lingered too long. Each encounter chipped away at his control until the man who ruled boardrooms found himself undone by the sight of her eyes. Late one night, he caught her standing on the balcony, watching the rain fall over the city lights. "You like the rain?" he asked quietly. She turned, her face illuminated by silver moonlight. "It reminds me that even the sky needs to cry sometimes." For the first time in years, Ethan smiled. Not the polished smile of a billionaire, but the kind that comes from somewhere deep, raw and real. In that moment, the empire he built, the titles he wore, all faded. What remained was a man, and the woman who unknowingly held his heart. But power and love seldom share the same throne. As his feelings grew, so did his fear. Loving her meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant risk. And risk was something Ethan Blake never took outside the boardroom. Yet destiny, patient and unrelenting, had already written its course. The hidden heart of power was no longer hidden. It was awakening. And in the quiet glow of his empty mansion, Ethan began to realize that the truest form of power wasn't in conquering the world. It was in surrendering to love. There are loves that burn like fire, wild, consuming, and fleeting. And then there are loves that bloom quietly, like dawn light slipping through curtains, soft, slow, and eternal. What grew between Ethan Blake and Clara Hayes was the latter. It wasn't loud or sudden, it was gentle, a feeling that arrived without permission and stayed without condition. For Ethan, who had built an empire of cold logic and flawless control, simplicity was a foreign language. His world revolved around the complex contracts, negotiations, and strategies that decided the fate of millions. Every hour was accounted for, every smile measured, every gesture calculated. But Clara, she lived differently. She found beauty in things he had long forgotten to see. The steam curling from her morning tea, the scent of rain on marble, the whisper of wind that danced through the mansion's corridors. Her laughter didn't echo through ballrooms, it bloomed softly in the kitchen, in the garden, in quiet corners of his vast, lonely estate, and without realizing it, Ethan began to crave that simplicity, that raw, unpolished honesty that made her shine brighter than the chandeliers above them. He would often watch her from afar. The way she folded linen, her fingers moving with care, as though every crease mattered. The way she paused to feed the stray cat that wandered the backyard each evening. She spoke to it as if it were an old friend, her voice filled with warmth, patience, and kindness. No luxury could imitate that. And slowly, Ethan began to understand something his wealth had never taught him. That love doesn't require grandeur, it thrives in gentleness. One evening, he found her sitting on the mansion's terrace, her hair unbound, eyes lifted to the sky as if listening to something only she could hear. He approached quietly, standing beside her. "Do you ever wish for more than this?" he asked, his tone curious, cautious, the voice of a man unused to vulnerability. Clara turned to him, her gaze steady. "More," she repeated softly. "I used to. I thought happiness was something waiting out there, in bigger houses and expensive clothes. But now I think it's in moments. Little ones, like this." Ethan followed her gaze toward the horizon, where the city lights melted into the night sky. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about his next deal or his next conquest. He was simply there, breathing the same air, feeling the same silence, beside someone who didn't want anything from him except his presence. That was her magic. Clara never asked, never demanded. She gave, through kindness, through grace, through the way she existed without pretension. She didn't belong to his world of luxury, yet somehow, She became the only thing in it that felt genuine. As days turned into nights, their unspoken connection deepened. Sometimes, it was the way their eyes met when she poured his coffee in the morning, a moment stretched thin with awareness. Other times, it was a wordless understanding when their hands brushed while passing papers or a cup. To the staff, it was invisible. To them, it was everything. Ethan found himself doing things he never imagined. Waking up earlier just to catch a glimpse of her humming to herself while arranging flowers, or walking to the garden where she tended roses with bare hands. He started to bring her small gifts, not diamonds or designer bags, but things she loved: a book of poems, a rare jasmine plant, a simple silver locket. Each one came without a word, left quietly on the counter or her desk. And though she never confronted him about it, she knew. And though he never confessed, she understood. One rainy night, when thunder shook the windows and lightning painted the sky white, Clara found him standing in the atrium, staring at the storm. "You don't like the rain?" she asked gently. He smiled faintly. "I used to. Before everything I built made me afraid of what I can't control." She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe control isn't what we need. Maybe we just need to feel, even if it's uncomfortable." Something inside him broke open, not in pain, but in recognition. For years he had chased perfection, but in that moment, standing beside a woman with rain-speckled hair and truth in her eyes, he realized that perfection was overrated. Simplicity, her simplicity, was divine. He reached out, almost without thinking, brushing away a strand of wet hair from her face. She didn't pull back. The world outside roared, but between them, there was only stillness, and the slow, electric pulse of something that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He walked through the mansion that had once made him feel powerful. Now it only made him feel lonely. Every gold-framed painting, every marble stair, felt meaningless compared to one stolen glance from Clara. For the first time, he understood the poverty of excess. Love, he realized, wasn't built on power or wealth. It was found in silence, in trust, in the moments that money could never buy. And as dawn broke, Ethan whispered to himself, "She's the only truth in a world full of illusions." The pure love of simplicity had touched the untouchable, and the billionaire who once believed in nothing began to believe in her. Love, when hidden, grows like a secret flame, delicate yet dangerous. For Ethan Blake and Clara Hayes, that flame had burned in silence for too long, dancing between longing and restraint. But one night, beneath a silver sky, silence finally gave way to surrender. It was late, past midnight. The rain had softened to mist, wrapping the mansion in a gentle hush. Clara stood by the library window, closing the drapes, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned startled, and there he was, Ethan. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his eyes shadowed not by fatigue, but by something heavier. Emotion he no longer wished to hide. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them was thick with everything they had never said. "You should rest, sir," she whispered, lowering her gaze. But his voice, low, rough, trembling, stopped her. "Don't call me that tonight, Clara." She looked up slowly. His expression was unreadable, torn between restraint and desire. He stepped closer, and she felt her breath falter. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, though her voice betrayed her. "Maybe not," he replied. "But I can't pretend anymore." Lightning flashed across the window, and for the first time, Ethan allowed his heart to speak louder than his mind. He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. In that single touch, the walls of pride, status, and fear crumbled. Their lips met, a collision of years of longing and loneliness. It wasn't planned, it wasn't perfect, it was real, painfully, beautifully real. That night, the billionaire and the maid were no longer divided by class or circumstance. They were simply two souls who had found each other in a world that never intended for them to meet. But love, when born in secret, always carries a shadow. In the days that followed, something in Ethan began to shift. He still looked at her with tenderness, but behind his eyes lurked uncertainty. The more he felt, the more he feared. What would the world say if they knew? What would his investors think? His name, his reputation, everything he had built could collapse under the weight of one forbidden love. And then, one morning, Clara came to him with trembling hands and tear-stained eyes. She held a small envelope, inside it a doctor's note. She was pregnant. Ethan's breath stopped. The words hung between them like thunder. For a long moment, silence devoured the room. Then came the words that would haunt him forever. "This isn't possible," he said quietly, stepping back. Clara's heart cracked. "Ethan, please." He turned away, anger and fear rising like a tide. "Do you have any idea what you're saying? Do you realize what this could do to my life? My company?" Her voice broke. "To your life. Ethan, this is your life. But pride is a cruel master. It doesn't listen to truth, it listens only to fear." Ethan, trapped between love and the image the world demanded he protect, made the choice that would cost him everything. He denied her. He accused her of lies, of betrayal, of trying to manipulate him. His words, sharp, deliberate, merciless, were daggers forged from panic. "Do you think I'm foolish enough to believe this? A billionaire's child, carried by his maid? No. You're better than that, Clara." A tear streamed down her face as she whispered, "I never wanted your money, Ethan. I only wanted you." But it was too late. His fear had spoken louder than his heart. That evening, Clara packed her few belongings, the same suitcase she'd arrived with. As she walked out of his mansion, the staff looked away, afraid to meet her eyes. Ethan watched from the balcony above, hidden in the shadows, his chest tight with something he refused to name. He told himself he was doing the right thing, that love was a weakness he couldn't afford, that she would forget him, and he would move on. But love doesn't fade with distance, it echoes, it stains. The nights that followed were sleepless. Ethan would sit in his study, staring at the fireplace where she once sat reading. He could still hear her laughter in the halls, smell her perfume in the air. Every corner of the mansion became a reminder of what he'd lost, and what his pride had destroyed. He drowned himself in work, meetings, and meaningless company. But no amount of success could silence the memory of her voice whispering his name. Months later he received a letter, unsigned, unadorned, yet unmistakably hers. It contained only 4 words, "He has your eyes." Ethan's heart stopped. He read the line again and again, his vision blurring. He realized, too late, that the truth he had rejected was the only truth that mattered. He tried to find her, searched through records, sent men to look, but she was gone. Moved away, disappeared into the world, leaving behind only memories and regret. And in his mansion of mirrors, Ethan Blake, the man who had everything, discovered the emptiest truth of all, that the greatest fall for any man isn't losing power or wealth. It's losing the one heart that ever truly loved him. Time has a way of humbling even the most powerful. Years had passed since that night. The night Ethan Blake lost more than love. He lost the part of himself that made life worth living. He had everything the world admired, his empire had doubled, his name echoed across continents, and magazines still crowned him as one of the world's most influential men. Yet, behind every photograph, behind every carefully constructed smile, was an emptiness that no success could disguise. He lived surrounded by luxury, marble halls, glass ceilings, gold-framed victories, yet the silence in his home grew heavier with every passing year. The laughter that once filled it had long disappeared. The scent of wild jasmine, once lingering softly in the corners, had faded into memory. And every night, when the world slept, Ethan would pour himself a glass of aged scotch and stare at the rain, remembering her. Remembering the one woman who had seen him, not as the billionaire, but as a man. He had told himself he'd moved on. But deep down, he knew some ghosts don't haunt, they wait. It was on a spring morning, 5 years later, that fate decided to return what he had buried. Ethan was attending a charity gala, an annual event he sponsored to showcase compassion he didn't truly feel anymore. Cameras flashed, journalists praised his generosity, but inside he felt nothing. He signed checks, shook hands, and smiled for the world, until his gaze drifted toward the corner of the hall. There by the donation table sat a small boy, no older than 4. His hair was chestnut brown, slightly messy, and he was helping his mother collect toys for an orphanage. His laughter, innocent, melodic, unguarded, sliced through the noise of polite applause. Something in that laughter stirred Ethan's soul. It was familiar, achingly so. He turned to look again, and then he froze. The boy turned toward him, curious. Their eyes met. Gray-blue eyes. Ethan's eyes. The glass slipped from his hand, shattering onto the floor. The sound drew glances, whispers. But he didn't care. The world around him blurred into silence. His heart thundered as if the universe had stopped breathing, waiting for him to understand what it had just revealed. He moved slowly toward the child, as if afraid the image would disappear if he blinked. The boy tilted his head, confused but unafraid. Children, after all, can sense goodness even when adults hide it. And then, like a vision he'd dreamed of 1,000 times, she appeared. Clara. Her hair was shorter now, her clothes modest yet graceful. Time had touched her gently. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of a woman who had suffered yet survived. When her eyes met Ethan's, the world stopped again. He whispered her name like a prayer that had been locked in his chest for years. Clara. She stood still, her lips parting, her breath catching. The weight of 5 years hung between them, years of pain, silence, and unspoken longing. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling. He's mine, isn't he? Her silence was his answer. Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. He looked back at the boy, who was now hiding shyly behind her leg. Ethan knelt down, unable to stand beneath the gravity of the moment. His voice cracked as he whispered, "What's his name?" "Lem," Clara said softly. "Lem," he repeated, tasting the word like it was sacred. He smiled weakly through his tears. "He's perfect." The Clara looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You weren't ready to see the truth before," she said quietly. "So I let time show you." Ethan nodded, his chest tightening. "And it did. It showed me every night I pushed away, every day I told myself I was right and how wrong I was." The boy peeked at him, curious. Ethan slowly reached into his pocket and took out his watch, the same watch his father had once given him, gold old, engraved with his family crest. He had never removed it for anyone. Now, he gently placed it into Liam's tiny hand. "I don't deserve to call myself your father," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "But if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it." Clara's eyes softened. She saw not the man who had once denied her, but the man who had finally found himself. Humbled, human, broken, and real. A small hand reached forward, Liam's, and touched Ethan's cheek. "Don't cry," the boy said innocently. "Mummy says crying means your heart is cleaning." Ethan let out a soft, choked laugh, tears streaming freely now. He looked at Clara through them. "You raised him beautifully," he said. Clara smiled faintly. "I raised him with love. The kind you once made me believe didn't exist." He stood slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "If you can forgive me, Clara, I'll give up everything. The companies, the wealth, none of it matters without you both." She shook her head gently. "I don't want you to give it up, Ethan. I just want you to finally understand what it means to have something that can't be bought." He stepped closer, the air between them trembling with everything that had been lost and now found again. "I do," he whispered. "Because I see it now in his eyes." Clara blinked back tears, her heart surrendering to the truth she had guarded for so long. And as the music swelled around them and people resumed their chatter, the three of them stood together, father, mother, son, in a corner of a world too loud to notice the miracle that had just unfolded. The eyes of truth had done what time and pride could not. They had healed. For in that gaze, that reflection of love, pain, and forgiveness, Ethan Blake finally saw the man he was always meant to be. Not a billionaire, not a symbol of power, but a father, a lover, a man reborn through the eyes of his child. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with thunder or applause. It comes softly, like dawn spilling over a long, cold night. For Ethan Blake, that dawn came in the form of a child's laughter, echoing through the hallways of a house that had once been silent. After that fateful meeting at the charity gala, everything began to change. Not all at once, but in the gentle rhythm of hearts learning to trust again. Ethan didn't ask Clara for forgiveness that night. He earned it moment by moment, through actions that spoke louder than words ever could. He started by showing up. Every day at first, he visited her and Liam quietly, without fanfare, without photographers. He would knock on the small wooden door of their modest home, dressed not in designer suits but in simple clothes, his billion-dollar presence now humble, almost human. He brought toys, but never expensive ones, puzzles, storybooks, little things that made Liam smile. The boy didn't understand who he was yet, only that this man had kind eyes and always knelt down to his level when speaking. It was as though Ethan was learning the art of being small, of meeting love where it lived, not where power could buy it. For Clara, the journey back to trust was fragile. She watched him closely, searching for the man she had once loved, the man beneath the pride, beneath the mask, and slowly, she began to see him again. One afternoon, he arrived early, finding her tending to her small garden behind the house. The sunlight brushed through her hair like liquid gold, and for a moment, he simply stood there, memorizing the peace that radiated from her. "You always loved flowers," he said softly. She didn't turn around. "Flowers don't need wealth to bloom," she replied. "Just light and care." He nodded, his voice gentle. "I wasn't your light before. I was the storm that broke everything." Oh, she finally faced him, her eyes steady but soft. "Then be the calm after it." Those words became his compass. Over the next months, Ethan changed his life in ways no one expected. He stepped down from several corporate boards, choosing instead to focus on building something new, not another empire, but a foundation in Clara's name, dedicated to helping single mothers. The world called it charity. Ethan called it penance. But his greatest transformation wasn't seen in headlines. It was in the way he laughed now, freely, unguarded, or how he carried Liam on his shoulders through the park, chasing kites in sunlight. One evening, Clara invited him for dinner, the first time since their separation that he'd been welcomed into her home as more than a visitor. The meal was simple: roasted vegetables, bread, and soup, yet it felt like a feast. As they sat at the small table, Liam chattered endlessly about his day, his little voice filling every corner with joy. Ethan listened, smiling, his eyes glistening under the warm light. When Liam finally fell asleep, Clara began clearing the table. Ethan reached out, gently stopping her hand. "Clara," he said quietly, "I've spent years searching for meaning in numbers, in glass towers, in applause. But it was never there. It was here, in this room, in your presence, in the way you look at me without judgment." Her breath caught. He continued, voice trembling but firm. "You once said happiness lives in moments. I never understood that until now. I was always chasing forever, but I see now that love is forever, when it lives in the right moment." Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting both pain and possibility. "Ethan, forgiveness doesn't erase what happened." He nodded slowly. "I don't want it to. The past is the soil where love grows again, stronger, deeper, wiser." Silence hung between them, filled with the heartbeat of all that had been lost and found again. Then, with a tenderness that spoke of years of longing, Clara reached out and placed her hand over his. "Then let's grow something new," she whispered. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't grand. It was real. And in that moment, Ethan felt the world exhale around them. Weeks turned into months, and spring turned to summer. Together, they began a quiet life, not one of mansions and headlines, but of shared mornings and slow evenings. Ethan sold his penthouse, moving into a countryside home where Clara could tend her garden and Liam could run barefoot in the grass. Every sunrise brought him peace, every sunset gratitude. The man who once ruled cities now found his kingdom in laughter, in soil, in love freely given. One night, as they stood on the porch watching fireflies dance across the fields, Ethan slipped his arm around Clara's waist and whispered, "You saved me." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "No," she said softly. "Love did." He looked out at the horizon, his heart full. "Then may we never forget what it cost to find it." And as the stars bloomed across the velvet sky, their hands intertwined, not as billionaire and maid, not as sinner and savior, but as two souls finally home. Because redemption isn't found in wealth or penance or words. It's found in the quiet act of choosing love, every single day. And so Ethan Blake's empire didn't end. It transformed. From marble to heartbeat, from power to peace, from ambition to grace. The man who once denied love now lived for it. And the woman he once broke became the reason he was whole again. In the end, love was not his weakness. It was his greatest victory. In the grand silence that follows every storm, there comes a whisper, the voice of truth. Ethan Blake, the billionaire who once measured life in numbers, finally discovered that the only true wealth is love. He had denied it, run from it, even broken it. But when he looked into his child's eyes, he didn't just see resemblance, he saw redemption. Those eyes reminded him of everything he had destroyed, and everything he could still rebuild. They taught him that forgiveness isn't a word, it's a choice, repeated each day until the wounds become wisdom. Clara didn't fall in love with his money, his power, or his name. She fell in love with the man he became when all of that faded away. The man who learned to listen, to feel, to stay. And so, their story became more than scandal and sorrow. It became a testament that even in a world of luxury, the rarest jewel is a heart that heals. Love, when true, doesn't demand perfection. It redeems imperfection. It softens pride, restores faith, and teaches us that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the ruins of our mistakes. When Ethan kissed Clara under the summer sky, it wasn't just romance, it was rebirth. Two souls, once broken by silence, now spoke a language deeper than words. Because in the end, he didn't find happiness in towers of glass, he found it in the laughter of his son. He didn't find peace in success, he found it in the warmth of her touch. And as they walked hand in hand into the horizon, the world finally understood. Love is not weakness. Love is the highest form of power. This was a story of redemption, of pride shattered by love, and love rebuilt from ashes. Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where every heart hides a tale, and every tale reminds us that no matter how far we fall, love will always find a way back home.